Well, good afternoon, almost evening for you, Larry.
It is evening.
Yes, it is, things are really being shaken up in DC. And I don't know if you noticed that we got shaken up here in Southern California this morning. I don't know if anybody knows that that wasn't just San Diego. I guarantee you, it was felt here. It was, nothing fell off a shelf, nothing was damaged, but it was a significant shaker. So, we're just awaiting the day, Larry, when I'm going to have a beachfront property here in Riverside. Yeah.
Well, it could happen. Could happen. I'm 300 miles, 200 miles from the coast. I could also have a beachfront
That's
property.
you can never tell. Okay, well, listen, I want to start today, Larry, with Brad Gerstner. And
Oh,
he put out a post that I'm going to read. He says it is hard to describe. Now, we need to say who Brad Gerstner is. Why don't you say who Brad Gerstner is?
well, Brad Gersonner is one of the legendary venture capitalists of Silicon Valley. He's also one hell of a good guy. He's also one very, very tall guy, come up to about his knees. I
And
learned that he rode the bench for the Gators in college.
oh, he did. Oh,
Yeah, I learned that last week, I think.
okay.
Uh, yeah, but he's the second half of the BG2 podcast, which I recommend to everybody.
Absolutely.
He's a very, very wise guy, and he made one of the very best speeches I've ever heard in my entire life, which I recommend everybody look up. It was at not the last, but the previous All In podcast,
Mhm.
and he spoke about regulatory capture.
And we'll talk more about that in a
We're
minute.
going to talk about it. Yes, yes. And I met him the first time I met him, the only time I met him, excuse me, the only time I met him was at the IFT-7 flight. That is the first time they caught
Yeah.
the super heavy rocket in the chopsticks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was, I'm not often starstruck. I've met a lot of, people with great names and so on, but I found myself dumbstruck next to Brad Kirst.
So I think he was one of the founding participants in Uber, right?
Well, in his venture capital world, in his venture capital role, he definitely was a big investor in Uber. Um, I don't have the details
Right.
of his investments here. Yeah.
So, but recently he said he was going to switch some of his investing out of Uber and into Tesla because of FSD. And then more recently, just a couple of weeks ago, he says, "Well, I've got some in Uber too, got some in Tesla. We'll see how it all works out." But all of that introduction to say that this is what he said today. It is hard to describe how quickly Tesla FSD changes your driving behavior and makes you happier behind the wheel. Less stress, more safe. It drives like a human. I find myself smiling and enjoying the car a lot more. And now that I'm hooked, it is worth the big money to me. So I just thought, coming from Brad, that was a pretty good
I
endorsement.
just I just screwed up, of course. Brad is alternative capital. I get Brad and his partner mixed up all the time. Anyway, so Brad is the smaller guy, and I haven't met
Okay, all right, okay. And so it was Gurley
him. Yeah,
that you heard the speech from. Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. All
Real
right.
good.
I'm
Real
glad
good.
Bill Gurley. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad we straightened that out.
So Brad Gerson is no taller than I am, or if he
Okay.
is, only an inch or two.
Okay.
And he's a very bright guy. So he's still active. He runs Altimeter Capital. And you're right, he was an early investor in Uber.
Yep.
And he is a very, very big investor in NVIDIA.
Oh, yes. Well, second story today is that President Trump on Monday suggested that he might temporarily exempt the auto industry. tariffs that he previously imposed on the sector to give car makers time to adjust their supply chains. He says, I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies with this change. Trump told reporters the Republican president said automakers needed time to relocate production from Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here, but they need a little bit of time. So I'm talking about things like that, which means he's talking about him. Actually, what does that mean, Larry? Doesn't that mean he's going to? I believe that's what that meant.
Probably so. I mean, one product at a time, he's going to roll back his tariffs, is my judgment.
Yes.
I think this tariff thing is a storm in a teacup.
There you go.
It has to be, because there's no way that he's going to get away with these kind of tariffs. But the real question is where we end with the dollar and with China.
Right. Yeah, and the dollar was a little bit up today, and China is still quiet, very quiet. I did do some analysis, Larry. I did ask Grok, actually, what do I know? But I asked Grok a bunch of questions and did some reading, and it sounds like wouldn't be that hard to get the rare earths all produced here.
Oh,
About
it would be so easy to get them produced here.
Okay.
So easy.
Okay.
The problem is there is no end to the bureaucracy to mine. And if you think the federal government can just wave a wand and take it away, no.
Even
There's
if
the states involved. There's all the NGOs involved. I mean, we are in a world of hurt. I've got a very long piece I've been writing for some time about this whole issue of our competitiveness.
right.
I listened to Niall Ferguson commenting on the tariffs in a very negative way, and commenting on, this administration's strategy with tariffs, and talking about pretty much the end of the world. But honestly, he's missing the point. The tariffs aren't the problem. And he says, we don't want to become a manufacturing nation because nobody would want to go into a manufacturing job. He has no idea what manufacturing is like anymore. Manufacturing has changed its face dramatically.
Right.
And the world has changed completely in terms of, where are we going with manufacturing labor, where are we going, and so on and so forth. So there's a revolution happening in manufacturing, and Tesla's at the very forefront of that. And, everything that Elon is doing is at the very forefront of that. But we still have this massive dependency on China, and it has nothing to do with manufacturing. It has everything to do with bureaucracy. And that's why Trump's order today is of such great importance.
Which is a great segue, Larry. Thank you very much.
The Goldberg rule.
Well, so I'm going to start with this. I'm going to say that I think somebody today said that Trump is I'm going to forget the word now. I didn't say he was a revolutionary, but it was almost like that. And I thought, maybe he should actually. Oh, that's good. I was thinking maybe we should refer to Trump as a progressive. I mean, these are progressive policies. These are not progressive in the new meaning of the word, but he's making progress in all of these areas so fast. And I've already said multiple times that he's moved faster on things than I could have possibly imagined, and further. I mean, stuff that wasn't even on my radar, but this might take the cake.
Well, it is the Silicon Valley way to move fast and break things.
Yep.
And very often when you break things, you find out what the problems are with your policies or, with your approach. Mm-hmm. And you revamp. And the classical and the analysts, the professors of history of old, professors of economic history, even Niall Ferguson, who's a hero of mine. I have his book. I have his book right here, The Ascent of Money. Empire. There are like 5 books of his right here. Moving fast and break things is not a bad thing. unless you really break
Right,
something,
right.
foundational.
Right.
And Niall's real concern, Neil, let's call the whole thing off. Neil's concern, he may be right. I mean, we may actually break something that really leads to disaster. But there's no doubt that Trump is trying things out and breaking things. Some of the things he's trying are not intelligent. I'm very opposed to how he rolled out this tariff thing. I'm not opposed to tariffs as such. And I do recognize that there is this amazing imbalance across almost every class of product between US tariffs and the rest of the world's tariffs. I think there's only one or two countries in the whole world where we have higher tariffs than they have. And I'm not even talking about the so-called, hidden tariffs.
Right.
Which one can argue about. And there is a lot of information that I've gleaned and that's interesting. It's all in my piece. But he's definitely doing the Silicon Valley, moving fast and break things. And he's broken a few things.
Yes. So one of the things that he's apparently ready, and we've known it was part of the way he campaigned, was he says, I'm going to get rid of regulations. But Larry, I didn't expect him to get rid of regulations like this. And so I've dubbed this new order, this new executive order, we're calling it the Tesla Larry rule. Because it's your hobby horse and you've been riding it for a long time. And pretty much since I've known you, I think one of the first shows that we ever did, you were talking about it. Yeah. So let's start. It says this executive order targets the real collusion in America. It's between big government and big business to prevent upstarts from disrupting their comfortable arrangements. This isn't left versus right. It's insiders versus outsiders. And
yes.
Is fighting for the outsiders.
So, and it goes so deep into the fabric of American society today that it's almost impossible to unstring the ball of wool. I mean, government and big business have colluded through the agency of lobbyists to create this protection around these major companies. And it has reached a point that it is threatening the lifeblood of the United States. And, I mentioned Neil Ferguson's rant this earlier, and he admits that. Now, he doesn't see that as foundational to the problem, but in every respect, it's the malaise underlying all these other problems, including, by the way, the tariff issue.
Right.
Because in many ways, the tariffs help knit this evil conspiracy together. And so the whole move to China, the allowing of the Chinese advantage in the manufacturing, all of that is part of this whole problem. I'm not sure how they're going to break it. And you only have to listen to Elon. I know people are going to say, oh, there he goes about Elon again. But Elon says, I'm not interested in tariffs. I'm not interested in government. I mean, he was opposed to the $7,500 IRA payment.
Right.
He's still opposed to it.
Yep.
He's opposed to all government regulations, all government assistance to business. And, Tesla has built out this entire charging network without taking a penny from government.
Right.
Not a penny.
They put in the infrastructure before they had the product.
They put in the infrastructure before they had the product, and they didn't ask permission.
Right.
And they still fight tremendous red tape. I mean, to get a connection, there are some supercharging sites that have been up for a year and still do not have a connection.
That's just
They're in the United States of America.
Well, let's go on that. Well, let me just say, as a transition to part two of this, is that Elon has said, get rid of the procedures.
Yeah.
The best procedure is no procedure. Well, a regulation is a procedure. So to the extent that we can get rid of, and what does he also say? He says you can get rid of these procedures, and then sometimes you might have to put one back. And it's a lot easier than going the other way, which
Get
is
rid of parts, get rid of processes, get rid of whatever is standing in your way. I mean, you sometimes think this part or this process or this method or this particular piece of whatever it is critical to the part. Take it out. Let's see if the thing falls apart.
right, exactly. So part two of this executive order is important because economic mobility depends on new business formation. How can anyone climb the economic ladder when regulations block the creation of new businesses? Trump is clearing the path for a new generation of American entrepreneurs and jobs. So for me, as a small business person, what I noticed over the years, Larry, as much as I was concerned about the EPA and all kinds of other things that interfere with manufacturing, the number one set of regulations that drove me crazy was employees. Because I love employees. I love my people. We're a family. But dealing with the red tape around employees was nutmeg. It drives you absolutely crazy. So, but anyway, in general, he's saying, you want to start a new business today, it's fraught with regulations and problems and things that keep you from being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to even begin to explain to anybody who hasn't started a business or tried to build a business how it's just an endless, and don't talk about healthcare.
Yeah.
I mean, healthcare is, if you look at healthcare, the actual cost of delivering a service is a minuscule part of what people pay for that service. If you boil it down to its true cost.
Yep.
And what is that? What are those layers of charges that roll up? They're just bureaucracy and red tape and the ability to keep competitors out of the market.
Right.
So you have 5 major companies in the healthcare industry in this country, and they have colluded together. They've colluded with government. They've colluded with state governments to keep all competitors out.
And so a great example.
By the way, I didn't have my microphone here. You couldn't have heard me very well.
You were good. You were good.
Okay.
I would have told you. So let's take medical as an example. If you are a doctor today, you're coming out of med school, or maybe you've been a doctor for a while, you want to start your own practice? There's no such thing anymore. Nobody goes into the practice of medicine as an individual. You can't afford to. And so there's no innovation.
No, it's not that you can't afford to. You can definitely afford to. You have no idea how bad it is.
Okay, it's worse.
What it is, there's several factors. And I recommend everybody listen to my interview that I did for Maverick Mind.
Yeah.
On this very subject with an expert. One of the great experts, Dutch Rojas, one of the great experts on the subject. Doctors are not allowed to own their own hospitals.
Right.
Hospitals that are quote unquote non-profit. Now, it doesn't mean they don't make profit. They make gigantic profits. Right. But they're non-profit, therefore they're not taxed, and they're protected. They have accrued all the power. And so what they do is they buy up these medical practices because these medical practices are confined to what they can do and what they can charge. Mm-hmm. These hospitals, these gigantic institutions, whether it's Duke or whatever the local healthcare, monopoly is, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, whatever the local monopoly is, squashes the local practices. Doctors have to join them, and then, that's it.
Right.
It's a done deal. And so we pay gigantic sums of money. I mean, Dutch gave an example of a medical procedure that is done in New York, I think a new hip. I
Right.
think that's the one he
Right.
gave.
It was. Yep. Yep.
For only $8,000 in New York, at the finest hospital in New York, you can get a new hip. Go down the street to one of the few remaining physician-owned clinics, you can get the same thing done for $800. And the difference between $800 and $6,000, I think I'm quoting the right numbers. You know, my memory's so bad, I could be out, but not far out in terms of the percentages. For only, 8 times the amount of money, or 7 times the amount of money, you can get the same procedure. No difference in anything. No difference in outcome, no difference in quality of service, no difference in quality of device used. The exact same procedure for 7 times the price from this great hospital in New York versus this clinic owned by the doctors.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of like scans, MRIs.
Right.
MRIs in the fancy, monopoly-owned hospitals, thousands of dollars.
Right.
MRI in the physician-owned MRI clinics, hundreds of dollars. And this goes on in every walk of life.
Right, precisely. And sometimes it's in terms of certification. Sometimes it's sometimes it's in terms of the kind of regulations that you have to, like the doctors again have all these regulations and they have to do it a certain way, which means you have to have X amount of computers.
No, it's not that they have to do it a certain way. That's not the problem.
They have to get insurance. They can only get the insurance payments if they do it the right way.
Insurance is the biggest. Healthcare insurance is the biggest scam in the world. Look, let's not get onto the healthcare because that's like the worst scam of it all. And by the way, Obamacare was like the layer of biggest cost of all these layers that were heaped onto the public.
Right.
Obamacare was the biggest disaster.
Right.
It's unspeakable what's been done to the American people. And then if you get into education, if you get into, whether you get into primary, when you get into preschool, whether you get into school or whether you get in college, what the government has done is just, I wrote a piece, I responded to Rohan Patel, who was mocking Doge or disparaging Doge. And I said, look, this is the problem.
Yeah.
These Democratic people, and Rohan is a really good guy, and he's a thinking person. He's a good friend of mine, but he wrote this piece, he just threw it off as a political statement. And I said, this is not right.
Yeah.
Doge is trying to do God's work.
Right.
And for this, they're being punished, this is like, this is like the cross that they have to bear.
Exactly.
They're being pinned up onto the cross. Why? Because they're ending all these grifts. But this is only just this much of it. But when you get into all of this bureaucracy, the bureaucracy is the channel that connects the huge corporations to the government. Because the bureaucracy is captured by these huge corporations. Why? Because the people move from the bureaucracy into the huge corporations and back again. It's the same true of defense. It's the same true of all these huge corporations, and it's the same true of the healthcare industry, and it's the same true of the defense industry.
Right.
And so you have this gigantic grift going on. And then, of course, they've added the new grift in recent years, these non-government organizations, these NGOs. It wasn't good enough that industry and finance and business were getting the grift. The NGOs invented. So we have a huge amount of work to do.
Now, I want to make sure right now that I give credit to this last section I've been in, because I never said who that was from. That's from Next News Network. I recommend that you follow these guys on X. They're really smart. But his last comment on this, he says, this order proves that Trump is the only president willing to take on both big government and big business for true free market competition. When establishment insiders lose, the American people win.
Absolutely. And you're going to hear so-called progressive politicians, and whether it's my good friend Rohan, or whether it's Bernie Sanders, or whether it's, Elizabeth Warren, or it's AOC, or, half the caucus, half the Democratic caucus, you're going to hear them calling out, these people, the billionaires, the millionaires, you're going to hear them crying foul. But they're the people who are committing the foul.
Right. Okay. So now the proof is in the pudding, Larry. Just breaking before I came on. Another huge win. The deficit dropped from $307 billion in February to only $161 billion in March. And it wasn't just month over month. It was year over year, down 32% from last March. So the Doge is already having its impact. The spending is already coming down. Just announced.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens to inflation. I think inflation is going to drop precipitously. People are talking about it rising, but I think it may drop.
I think you're 100% right. Now, I think we will have a price increase. As one of the administration people said today, you'll get a price increase because of the tariff increase, but it'll be a price increase.
Tariffs don't necessarily translate to price increases. This is it's much more complicated than that.
Oh, you're singing my song, Larry, but MIT suggested it probably about 20% of it will translate into a price increase. I'm good with that. It might mean it goes up 6%. 0.6% this year.
There are so many misconceptions. Neil Ferguson talks about, Barry calls him Neil. I guess he calls himself Neil. I've always called him Neil Ferguson. Neil Ferguson says that, that people work in these terrible conditions in industry. I guess he's never been into a modern car factory. I guess he's never actually seen a Tesla production line. He's never been to SpaceX. I don't think he gets it.
No.
I don't think he understands what modern industry is all about. And I don't think he's ever been into a chip manufacturing plant. I don't think he understands what's happened to industry. He came out of Wales from the Glasgow shipyards and so on and so forth, where working conditions were horrible and industry meant, a horrible job. And you see all these memes on X with these, big fat people trying to work in these sweatshops and so on.
Right.
Industry doesn't mean sweatshops anymore.
Larry, I was in plastics manufacturing, as you know.
Yeah.
It's not even like some of these modern things like auto manufacturing. It is plastics and pellets and all this stuff. You could eat off the floor of my.
In 1979, one of my companies owned a injection molding and extrusion plant.
Right.
And when you say you can eat off the floor, I have pictures of these shiny floors.
Right.
These machines standing in pristine, conditions.
Right.
And people have no idea, none at all. They think about these old steel mills and these old sweatshops. What crap.
First of all, there's not as many people. Anyway, listen.
And by the way, our good friend, well, all right, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm going to talk about Jeff telling us how he could manufacture an iPhone in this country competitively.
Yes.
People don't understand it. They just don't get it. If Elon manufactured an iPhone in this country,
it would be
the lowest cost iPhone made in the world.
Right. Right, exactly. And what I've also said on the show a couple of times, Larry, is that commonly the difference between the price, even with the other government, with the Chinese government involvement and everything else, often the landed price on my floor or your floor or anybody else's floor between China and the US was maybe 5% or 10%, because you got the freight, you've got all the other considerations of getting it out of country, into country, quality control, all the rest of that. Sometimes it came down to 5% or less, but you still went to China because you'd rather have them do the hassle, or you
Yeah.
China because they were better at packaging or whatever.
The
But
packaging in China is incredible.
you know,
Incredible.
they're
Wow.
very good at it. All right, I'm going to go back to your
Yeah.
post,
Sorry.
Larry. This is
Yeah.
your post. You're going to be talking to yourself. So you said the record keeping in many areas due to unfettered and uncontrolled growth in administrative structure has been deeply involved. I'm so believe you, believe, believe me, I know. I've been deeply involved in trying to automate several agencies is chaotic. This is government bureaucracy, chaotic, and trying to
Yeah.
use government records to bring order is almost impossible. Rohan mocks as being a chaos and confusing machine is directly attributable to the chaos and confusion that are the federal records and immigration of recent years. It didn't happen overnight. As an immigrant that arrived 42 years ago, I experienced it to a degree, but in recent years, it fell apart completely. So part of the getting rid of regulations is just to make it easier to run the government, because it's their own internal rules, regulations, processes, and procedures that are getting in the way of them being effective.
You know, when we started working, I'll give you an example. We started working at a government agency. This was the biggest contract my company had ever got. A major government, a huge government agency. And so I led that project because I had to have eyes on it. It was a very big project for us. And I didn't think about it, but I went through the whole security thing and I got my security clearance. I showed up and they said, well, you've got to take this training course, security training course, before you can be issued your laptop. This went on for almost an entire work week. The whole process of taking the course, and then they couldn't get me into this course, they had to get another course, and then that had to change. It went on, and the number of people that it took to furnish me with a laptop was incredible. I think I had 4 or 5 people involved in just issuing me with a laptop. And I don't know, you know, I attended a course with 20 other people, and then there was another course, but I can tell you that it went on for 5 days. And that was 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
What goes on today?
So you've got the processes, the procedures. Then number 2, you said the federal bureaucracy itself has grown powerful, incredibly powerful, and has accrued very substantial political power, particularly through the Democratic Party and its NGO tentacles. It can mobilize incredibly influential power very quickly. In many states, it is the Gorgon that controls all elements of power.
There's no doubt about it. You know, you look at how the IRS handled these Jewish political groups back under Obama. They committed serious crimes. They conspired. A group of them in the IRS conspired to commit serious crimes against these NGOs attempting to register as non-profit organizations with the IRS. The woman who ran that was shown to be, I mean, she was the prime mover. She got off scot-free,
Right.
and they protected her, and they gave her a full pension.
Right. Yep.
And that was under Obama.
Right.
And things have only got much worse now.
Right.
You only have to look at these IRS, these guys who, blew the whistle on the IRS about this whole laptop thing. Now, I have nothing against Biden. He's a doddery old man, and he wanted to protect his son, but his son was a bad guy. And his son committed serious crimes, and he may have involved his father in it. But he was protected by the powers of the IRS. And these guys, they tried to ruin their lives.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about huge power.
Right. Number 3, you said, the Democratic Party can flex its will within the bureaucracy and in the judiciary and the administrative state. Think administrative judges whose power of in-house tribunals still lingers, even though the government said that it's not the right way to do it. We have, the
Supreme Court.
We have without doubt developed a single party national bureaucracy that is extremely resistant to change and, as you point out, very powerful.
I'm very sensitive to this. I come from South Africa. In South Africa, the National Party, the party of apartheid, gained power in 1948. And they took over the bureaucracy. They took over the civil service. The South African civil service was a remnant of the British civil service. It was an incredible civil service. They took it over and they became corrupt. And that's what's happened in the United States. I recognize it. I see it. It's evident in every single department, in every government, bureaucracy, in every part of this quasi-state. It is ever present. Every single, if you go to Washington, D.C., and you look at the voter registration,
it's all Democratic.
It's like 82% Democratic. These are the people working in these agencies. These agencies are arms of the party.
And you say this is the singular reason that Democrats reflexively view the attempt by Republicans to reform government, to rein it out of control, its spending and the profligacy. They view it as a political act and are attacking, and you don't say it, but I want to say literally attacking.
Yes. I have to say that it's one of the most serious issues we face in this country. Look, I don't think the Republicans are darlings. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're the Winston Churchills of this age. I don't think Trump is either. But give them a chance. This bureaucracy is not going to give them a chance. This press is not going to give them a chance. Ron Patel is not going to give them a chance. He calls them out, and he makes these statements, but there's no evidence of that he gives at all. And I'm not pointing a finger at Rohan. He's a good guy, and I really love the man. But people don't think about it. When you think about the whole Trump-Russia thing, the Russia thing, he calls it. If you think about that, it was a criminal conspiracy.
Right.
It was a criminal conspiracy led by this congressman and now he's a senator from California.
Jeff.
In any reasonable world, this man would have been put away for 20 years.
Yeah.
He lied. He lied to Congress. He lied under oath. He lied to the public. And he lied again and again and again. And the worse it got, the more he lied.
Yes. So
nothing happened to him. He was made senator.
Well, that's because he's from California, Larry. And what you're talking about, of course, has spilled over into the states. And you mentioned the next number 6, you say what has happened is that the major cities in some states is that what was in process in the federal government, absent serious reform, that is the malaise our nation could fall into, that the states are in the same boat. So they got the same bureaucracy. They're having to live under federal laws. Then they're probably they have state laws. So the cities are already hamstrung by federal laws, state laws, and then they put their own layer of laws on as well, which hamstrings business, but also hamstrings themselves from accomplishing what they even set out to do, which is this new book by Ezra Klein, on talking about how the liberals can't get out of their own way. They can't even accomplish their own goals because their own processes and procedures get in the way of them getting their goals.
You have to laugh at Ezra Klein. I mean,
I do. I laugh.
yeah, I mean, honestly, the situation is really bad. And, look, there are many Republicans who feed off the same trough.
Sure,
Many,
absolutely.
because there's an institutional Republican Party
Right.
that are very, very powerful in many states.
Yep.
And who've become institutionalized, and they have their own bureaucracies.
Yep.
And so, look, Trump is no angel. He wasn't my first choice, as you well know. I was converted to Trump because of the circumstances, and I do think that he's evolved himself. Now, as you know, I'm a huge critic of the moves they've made in tariffs. I think they had every right on their side and they did everything wrong. So there's enough blame to go around everyone. But honestly, he's got this one right. He's got this issue right, the issue of bureaucracy, the issue of the regulations. These issues are very serious. He doesn't tackle the party thing. He doesn't tackle the problem of the bureaucracy having become institutionalized as an arm of the Democratic Party. But he is tackling an incredibly important thing, and that is the handcuffs we have put on ourselves in terms of industry. And it gets back to Neil Ferguson. Neil Ferguson thinks that this tariff thing is the end of the world, or the end of America and its leadership in the world. No, the end of the world are these handcuffs. That's the end of the world. Okay. Absent these handcuffs, with or without tariffs, the country can blossom.
I think that Neil Ferguson and others, unfortunately, haven't been able to, how would you call it, reverse their thinking enough to understand what Trump is actually trying to do. Trump would prefer to have zero tariffs, but also zero, not what do you want to call it, other kinds of regulations that act like tariffs.
Yeah.
He'd like to have free and fair trade actually, and the United States could compete if there was free and fair trade actually.
Yeah, but I think Neil Ferguson's real point is not that there shouldn't be free and fair trade. I think his point is that the way Trump has gone about it has sabotaged the ability of America to provide leadership. That it is actually retreating into a America First kind of fortress, and it is sloughing off the control it has over its empire. So it's a little bit deeper than that. I think you got to listen to him speak, and I don't want to misrepresent him. You got to listen to him directly. So I think he has some points there, and he's not wrong that Trump has blown this whole tariff thing.
Well, that's a whole nother story, Larry.
That is another. Yeah, I know.
You and I could probably go on for an hour on that one.
You don't like hearing that as well. I don't.
Oh, no. Listen, I'm okay. I'm not saying that it couldn't have been approached differently. I think that it's going to be fine. That's all I'm saying. I think it's going to be fine because
but you think everything's going to be fine, Randy? Randy, come on.
But historic. But okay, so I didn't know this until today.
Yeah.
Someone pointed it out. Then in 2017, I think it was. Anyway, right after he was elected the first time, we had a 20% drop in the GDP. I'm sorry, in the S&P.
Yeah. There was a huge,
as he was trying to put the tariffs
and then it dropped. Yeah. Went up again. Look. I mean, he can retreat from the situation he's in right now. I mean, I think, Neil Ferguson's view, I think, is a pretty extreme view. But look, the Tesla-Larry rule, it is the biggest single impediment to our current state of affairs. And if we don't break this, if we don't break it, if we don't leave it lying on the floor, and if Trump does nothing but get us out of this malaise, then he will have become one of the greatest presidents of modern time.
Right. That's right. Okay. So let's look at the numbers, but I want to look at them in a special way, Larry. I brought this up the other night, but I'd like to run it by you as we go through the numbers. So let's start with the bonds. So last week, the world was coming apart. The headlines were that people are taking all their money out of America and they no longer respect America and they're no longer going to invest in America because look at the bonds, they're at 4.49. Now, it turns out that they were at 4.49 in January, Larry.
I know.
And they were at 3.9 just before all of this really started.
But remember how excited we were that they were going down.
I know, I can remember. And now tonight they're at 3.84, just about 15 basis points off at 3.49. None of this is the end of the world, Larry. This sounds to me like kind of normal amounts of swing that you and I have been looking at for 2 years together, up and down, up and down. Now, it may have gone the opposite of what people thought it would, as you and I talked about during February, but
yes,
it's still not 5.9 or something or 7%. So it seems to me it's kind of within a normal range, is all I'm trying to say. It went fast.
Yeah. Well, okay.
All right, but we're down to 4.84 again. We're going in the right direction. Hopefully it continues to go in the right direction. We've got oil is at 61.61. And people last week were saying, oh, the oil's going down. This is proof we're going into a recession. That was the other headline, proof we're going into a recession. But we were at 59, now we're at 61. You and I look at this twice a week, Monday and Friday.
Right.
It's been between what? Between 60 and 80, pretty much, for months and months and months.
Yeah, but we thought 60 was a win.
Yeah, and I still think 60 is a win. All right, how about natural gas? We talk about that just being this crazy, just always swinging around. Today, it was up pretty strongly. It is just so that we are complete here. Natural gas was up. It's sitting at $3. Oh, no, actually came back down, but it is up in the pre-market, $3.34 at this point. That's kind of in the middle, right in the middle of where it's been recently. Then gold. Okay, Larry, gold. Now, this is definitely the end of the world. It's gone up so much this year. And it's because of the flight of capital.
End of the world.
And everybody's worried about, the future. And so they're moving to gold in order to protect their assets. Well, except that, did you know that gold went up 40% in 1994?
Oh, yeah, I remember it very well. You have no idea what happened in the early 80s.
Yeah, right.
Late 70s, early 80s.
I'm just talking. I said I say 1994. I'm so sorry. I meant 2024 last year.
2024.
2020. It went up 40% last year, Larry.
I know.
So I don't think that this is a new rush to gold. It looks to me like it's the same old rush to gold.
Yeah, gold hasn't, yeah.
And right now it's at 32.28. You were predicting 3,300 just a few weeks ago. So I'm sorry, I don't see the problem here. Silver, 32.28. It has not gotten back to 35, which is where it was a couple of weeks ago. Copper, 0.75, kind of right in the middle, almost exactly of the 415 to 515 that you and I have been seeing for the last few weeks. I mean, everything's kind of in the middle of where it was. And then we get over to the dollar was it all-time highs? All-time highs, all-time highs. It's barely off of those all-time highs now, but it has dropped. It has dropped. But I don't think do you think it's wildly dropping?
Not cataclysmic.
Not cataclysmic. Okay, now we get to the Dow and the S&P. S&P, the 10% off of all-time high would be 55.20. We're at 54.23. So we're just about a 1.5 off of the 10%. What do you want to call it? We had my what's the word? Come on, Larry, help me out. The 10% is you have when you come down 10%, it's called
a retraction. I don't know what.
Yeah, but it's not a bear market. It's just a correction. So the 10% is a correction, so we're about 1.5 points now different than the correction. So it went down to 20% off, but I call that a knee-jerk reaction, and it looks like it's getting pretty solidly in this little space of around 10%. And what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're not out of the woods.
Which woods?
We're not out of the potential, I mean, we could see the S&P fall by another 10, 20%.
We could, absolutely.
Those would be woods.
Those would be woods. Okay, is that your right now? Is that what you would be thinking happens?
It's a very, very, very fluid situation because we don't know what Trump has in mind to do, and I'm not sure he knows what he wants to do.
Would your best guess, my best guess, I'm going to tell you my best guess, you can just reflect on it. My best guess is that whatever the tariffs are, they're going to be less than what they are now.
Yeah, in all probability.
So therefore, the idea then would be maybe that we have the bad news is all priced in. Yeah, I one more minute, Larry.
Okay, I gotta go because
no, we're right at the end. We're at the end. So
okay.
It's timing. Okay. So anyway, that's my theory is that we're it's all priced in. He's not going to have higher tariffs than now. So it's probably going to get better unless he comes up with something new to stir things up.
It all turns on what China does, and it all turns on how hot the discourse gets and whether it actually gets out of control.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be good.
But for those people who think that there's no manufacturing going to happen in this country, NVIDIA announced today that their new computer, which is, going to be the future of NVIDIA, is going to be manufactured in the United States.
In Texas, of course.
In Texas, of course. So for those people who think that, we cannot manufacture in this country, boy, have you got some learning to do. Because right. Not only can we manufacture, but we are going to manufacture in very large scale.
Agreed, 100%. We end on a very agreeable note, Larry.
Well, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
As always, love having you on. We'll see you on Friday, if not before. And it's been, for all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.
Thanks, Randy.